Okay, we're ready when you are.
Yeah. I'm gonna call this what is it? April 2nd work session to. And we don't have a chair right now, so the commission would like to select a chair for this work session that will also run into the regular meeting afterwards. And we already have a volunteer for that chair for the evening. Carol here is going to take that position.
Okay, well, if there's no objection from the commission, Carol Griswold will be the presiding officer tonight, and you may move to the chair's position to better run the meeting.
Alrighty. Courtney or Claire, how about Courtney? Could you change the name tag, please? Is this the correct chair?
The chair.
Chair. Yes. Okay. And I don't believe we gavel in work sessions. Or do we?
Well, Commissioner Charbonneau already gavelled you in.
Oh, good.
So you're good to go
Oh, good.
to
Okay.
the first topic, and you do have a quorum.
Alrighty. I'd like to remind everyone to turn off your cell phones or silence them. And we're going to start the planning and zoning work session, which is on the, just a second please, the planned unit developments. Would administration like to give an overview of that?
Yeah. So a lot of the information I included in the packet was a lot for the public to kind of follow our process of getting here, but then also for the commission just to refresh, how we got here as well. So on page 6, the reason why we're discussing plan unit developments is due to the recent the conditional use permit for a plan unit development over on Nash Road that was approved. And what I gathered, and if there's any additional input from the commission here, if I didn't cover all the concerns, but the main concerns that the commission expressed during this conditional use permit process was that it's a gated community with a private road, that Seward doesn't have precedence of this, and so we didn't know how we wanted to deal with this. And then, of course, the lack of a plan unit development requirements in city code, and then that our subdivision code is very minimal. So there's lots of reasons for why a developer would choose a plan unit development. This particular application, the developer was needing to use a plan unit development because they could not install utilities according to what code required due to their location. And then they were installing a private road, which code doesn't have any regulations for private gated road, and then they wanted docks, which is a use that wasn't allowed, or sorry, not specified in code. And so for these 3 reasons, that's why they chose plan unit development. I briefly touched on, addressing this gated community private road. I don't want to get into too much depth, but just maybe ask the commissioners, is this something that we want to address later and actually put language in code, like the example here from the Kenai Peninsula Borough, or do we just leave it as something that can be only allowed through a plan unit development?
I personally would like to do something like the Kenai, the borough did, because for the private roads, and have something in place. Because we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And I don't want to have to, rehash it every single time we have an applicant that wants a private road. If it's already in there, they can just read through and adhere to it, and it shouldn't be a problem. But I think that would be easier to actually put something in, kind of like the borough has. I really like the way they have it lined up.
Yeah, I think that's logical, makes sense to me. I mean, so I know myself, like, I'll forget lots of stuff, I'm human. And yeah, if we can just, it would save us future commissions a lot of time to just have it, I think.
Just spell it out
And,
once.
As long as we come up with something, yeah, reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, it might be, yeah, we'll have to, I guess it could be part of, because in the borough code, it's part of their subdivision title, so we could include it in our subdivision title. We'll do some asking around, because I don't know how it would interact with our current, I can't remember which title it is, but we do have a title that deals with streets and roads, so I don't know
Okay.
where it would be put into code, but we can look into that. Any other comments or thoughts on that one before we move on?
So the understanding is, this gated community private road code that's in the borough subdivision title code would be just spelled out right in our subdivision code, which is also a recommendation to them anyway. But at least that would be defined, the gated community and the private road would be defined, regardless of how we decide to deal with it on the PUD. Is that right?
Right.
So that would be established.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, so we have nothing about gated communities. And I really liked how they required the turnaround in front in case you denied entry. Then what, you back up on the road? So those are well thought out, I think.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we'll address this or dig into it a little bit deeper at another work session then.
Yeah.
And we probably can address it with our further subdivision discussions, but.
And just one other point here, concerns at the top that you listed. I'd also like to add number 1, if it's part of that, or make another entry, but the docks were a big concern to some of the public, including me. And the enforcement of CUPs is really difficult.
Yeah,
And that's something that is almost right now a free pass, just free illegal zoning violations. So I think we need to work on enforcement. And then that 2007 Planning Association document that we received did mention how there are concerns with what happens if this subdivision, this PUD is sold or subdivided. And then who's going to make sure that the goal to have shared common space is continued, and the boundaries might change, the ownership might change, and they might decide they want to build something different. So it's a very tricky concept, I think. And Homer's recent PUD failed, and now it's in courts. It's under appeal. It's very tricky. And another reason the applicant used a PUD is they wanted mixed uses on one property. They wanted townhouses and condos and single families, and then we don't know what we're going to do over here. So that wouldn't be allowed normally in that resource management zone. So that was a strong reason why they wanted this particular style of development, so they could just mix it together.
Yeah, the enforcement issue is something that we definitely need to dig into more, and it is on our list to talk more about the conditional use permit process as a whole, and try and get a better process and more accountability with that.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I've been trying to get enforcement tightened up ever since I first got applying.
Me too.
Years and years and years ago.
Me too, before you. Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking about is we need to sort of have a hierarchy, like can you address utilities with our existing code? Can you address your private gate? Of course, we'll now have this code here where If they have everything else that's just normal, then you can do a private gate and a private road. If it's built to all the standards, in case you want to give it back, you know, it's fine, you know, it's all to code. And just go through reasons why an applicant would seek that designation, and see if it first could be addressed under our code. And it just
Versus a
seems
PUD.
like, yeah, can you do
Yeah.
this with, like they were talking about, oh, reducing setbacks, and it's like, no, we like our setbacks, they're really important. Like, where are you gonna put your snow, and light and air, and it just seems, we shouldn't be so quick to say, sure, you can develop X amount of acres, and that's, the size thing is really important to me too. And then squish people in and not really guarantee that there might be common space in the future, green space. So I think we have to be really careful with this concept. Does it fit our community? It's allowed, I wrote this down, it's allowed in R1, R2, R3, auto commercial, business, central business, and resource management by CUP right now, without any regulations at all, but it is already in there. So that covers a lot of our zoning areas.
Almost all of it.
Yeah, almost all of it. And why not industrial? Why not, because this document talked about industrial PUDs. Maybe that would be one of the more appropriate places. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it all makes sense, and, you know, reading through that Homer's code on it, I did see that they addressed several of the
Right.
concerns. They did a pretty
Right.
good job addressing that, so
Right.
I'd like to look a lot more at theirs
Mhm.
for maybe writing ours, so we don't have to reinvent too much of a wheel.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad that you brought that up, and that's kind of why I included a lot of that information about PUDs in general to show the commissioners, like, this is a very wide door that developers have that they can go through, and well, right now, basically, there's nothing in our code besides the CUP process. They can request whatever differences they want from our code right now. I mean, the commission would still be the end all of deciding whether they would be allowed to develop their property different than what code allows. But if we do, so I mean, I guess we have a question here then of, do we just take PUDs out of our code? Do we think future development can be addressed adequately with what we have in code? Or do we leave PUDs in and create regulations like Homer or these other examples that would then kind of put a cap on how extreme a developer could be? Because we could set, like, okay,
Yeah.
they can vary their lot size, but only up to this size, you know what I mean? Or they can vary their setbacks, but only up to this.
I think we should, you know, address something like Homer did and put it into our code, because in the future, I mean, I can see the benefits for developing larger areas that have a cohesive design, and this is a pretty decent way to do it. But it definitely needs to have restrictions, and it needs to be in code so that we don't have to go through the same thing we just went through with multiple work sessions and trying to hash it out with the developer. We can just come in, read our code, look at our private drive, run through it all, submit an application, and then we can just have it kind of all laid out the way we need to have it to make a proper decision.
And have that list of criteria. Brendan, did you want to add?
You know, I understand where Courtney's coming from. I think just like we don't want to encourage these, more or less, in some ways, but it's a kind of reflection of inadequacies in our code that developers are incentivized to go this way. And I think there is some stuff we could do. Like, if we really wanted to stop these and have more control, we'd have to update our code and put in things that these developers are looking for. Like, it seems like our code is too restrictive in some ways and not restrictive enough in others. Like, and whatever they're going for, we're just like our code's, yeah, kind of weird in that way. And we talked about this before in like form-based codes and stuff like that, is kind of like ways to do it. And it's, you can, you know, it's, yeah, it just gets back to like, we keep on coming up with solutions to like put a quick fix on the code versus like a long term. And I think PUDs are like a quick fix. Like, and if that's the best we can do for now, that's fine. But maybe have a long-term goal of removing them in the future and actually putting proper things into our code.
Make a list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. I think I would rather have a specific pathway than trying to loosen up some of the restrictions on zoning areas. Because I don't know, just this seems a little more specific. Whereas if we just loosened up on some, that broader reach might be not quite what we want either. So they're both good ideas there.
I mean, is it a good goal to try to have any PUD code kind of mirror our regular city code? You know, if you just want to, you know, this development that brought this upon it was out of necessity because of the utilities. You couldn't hook up to water. So the only way to develop over there was with PUD. And I don't know all the differences, but that's a difference, that you can do a PUD over there. You can't just do a regular code. But, you know, I like these examples from Homer and Matsu and the other one were good. I think we could definitely borrow from there. But is that like a reasonable goal to try to have any PUD code kind of match up with Seward City Code, you know, where it's all these rules you mentioned that we like are kind of in the PUD too? And Nathaniel, your like benefits, you know, I wonder, like, when would a developer look to do PUD? Now there's precedent, so it's like, oh, okay. Like, when is that preferred to just regular development? When, you know, when it's allowed, when it's, you know, and like, what benefits are you thinking of like a big development? Like, you know, it makes sense, but I just like specifics, like, because you could just kind of all plan it at once, or can you talk on that a little bit? Like,
well, I guess what I was trying to get at is, there's multiple ways to do it, but if there's a large, or not be a large, a portion of land that's going to be developed into multiple homes.
yeah. There's a consistency.
Consistency is what I like, and I guess you could get that way various paths. I mean, you might not have to go this way, you might could just do a normal subdivision that we already have.
Right.
So I guess I'm not opposed to that. If the code is strengthened and changed to mirror kind of what PUD would, you know, we need to hold it within, and that does hold everything else to that same standard. I like the consistency that they would bring to areas, but I guess this normal subdivision would do the same thing.
Okay.
But if we're going to allow them like this, I definitely want it in code. So we either need to put it in code that we have an organization that they follow and they can get a PUD, or we just don't have PUDs and mirror code, like you guys were talking, mirror code to what we would normally do if we had the PUDs. So they, yeah,
You know,
but that's not super clear.
well, that's good. I wonder if it's just like PUD, you know, if you could code, or just this idea of like only out of necessity, where that's, you know, are there going to be other things coming up where there's, you know, no water, no utilities, or other reasons where you need a PUD that doesn't satisfy city code? I mean, that's, just go to this precedent, that's why we did it, and that's why it was applied for.
We have other areas where homes are not on water and sewer, seeing water and sewer because they're not there, that they are in city limits, and they didn't need to do that. But they were just going one or two homes at a time
I see.
versus the whole large area.
Right.
So I don't know.
I mean, the northern portion of the tract that they subdivided would be another potential PUD
Right.
in the future.
Right. Yeah.
But along your question of if we would mirror our current code in the CUP, So with this planned unit development over there, they rezoned to multi-family residential. And so because of that rezone, they are still following the zoning code for multifamily. So they follow the setbacks for multifamily, the minimum lot size. They follow the uses, land uses allowed, and they wouldn't be able to, primarily because their CUP does not allow any other uses besides the docks. They have to follow everything that is in code for that zoning district. But so we could, in our code, specify in the plan unit development certain uses that would be allowed, and then just say, but the development requirements will follow the zoning code already established. And then the developer would have to be required to rezone, kind of like with the Hilltop subdivision.
Okay.
You know, how they rezone different portions of it according to the land uses that they wanted, R3, R2, R1. And then, so they get different uses within their subdivision, but they still have to follow the zoning code.
So it's already in there, really.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a zone, and that goes to code.
So I don't think, if the commission doesn't feel like there's a need to allow a lot of variance with lot sizes and setbacks and that sort of thing, then we can defer to our code and just say, if you want, you have to still follow the zoning code. Whatever your property is zoned, that's the development requirement you'll follow. But for whatever, gated streets, utilities, or whatever else the commission decides would be areas that could have allowances different than what code establishes, then those would be the only ones that could be discussed and determined in a planned unit development CP.
So, could you explain what is different? They didn't have septic, they don't have sewer, so they had to do some sort of a septic accommodation. And lots on Maple Street don't have sewer either, so they have tanks, or I don't know what they have. They have their own private
Septic
way.
system.
Yeah, septic system. It might be a tank they have to pump out, or it might be a leach field, which would require certain acreage for the leaching. That's all DEC. But I believe that's allowed in our code. If you're farther than 600 feet from the sewer line, you can put in your own system. So that wouldn't have necessarily been a deal breaker over
Right.
there. The private road
Yeah, they could have
is
done a
up to our,
variance.
it's up to borough standards, so that's not a deal breaker. The gate is something new to us,
Yeah, it was
but that
primarily
could have
the
been
water.
a variance or something, right? Just thinking how they could have developed that without this planned unit development.
Yeah, everything
because-
could have been, like, even the even the docks could have just been a normal CUP, but it was the water. Code doesn't allow wells
Okay,
any other way. Yeah, so I guess in there, so they could have done multiple, so that if they didn't do the planned unit development, they would have had to have gotten city council approval to waive the the city water requirement.
okay.
Then they would have had to get a CUP for the docks, and they probably would have had, I don't know if they would have had to get some sort of allowance for the gated private road, either CUP or something, but anyway, so given the number of permits that they would have been required to get, the planned unit development packaged it into a
I see.
more feasible process. Yeah.
Sounds like, just describing it that way, that really the only thing that need to be changed to make this go through is that the same stipulations on wells as we have on septics.
Right.
Mhm.
You're not within 600 feet. You can put in your own water system.
And then you tie in if at some point the
Right.
infrastructure is
Perfect.
brought within
Yeah, that's-
600
that's
feet.
perfect.
Yeah,
Right.
just like the septics. So that seems like the only
Right.
thing that's different, really. I mean,
Mhm.
private road, which I still want to have some wording and code for private road and whatnot, so we don't gated community in that kind of area. But it seems like the only one that's the difference. So do we even, like
Do we need it?
Omen said, do we really need to
Right.
do it? I just want to make
Right.
sure that if we're gonna do it, we have it outlined. I just don't want to get in
Right.
that mess of trying to work it out at the
Right.
last minute.
Right.
Well, and we have a PUD now, you know,
We have one,
right?
and our new plan recommends 2 or 3 more to the south of them, on the spine of Dallas, next to
Yeah.
the water. Very difficult land to develop.
But it sounds like if we just changed a few things, then they wouldn't actually need to get a PUD. They could just develop it as a normal subdivision,
Right.
like they did up on Hilltop and,
Right.
and Doorway back in the day, and
Mhm.
the rest of that area. There.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very appealing. Instead of, I mean, these codes are huge. Instead of adding this whole nother layer of code that duplicates a lot of what we have and what we like and what we want, it seems like it'd be better to tweak our existing code a little bit. Like apply the water the same as sewer.
It should be the same as sewer.
Right. And the other things, you know, the private road still should be up to our standards.
Yeah, of course.
And the only reason that makes it private is because of the gate. So the gate is the issue, not the private road. I don't think we'd even have to discuss private road separately.
No,
It's a
because
road in city
it would
limits.
fall underneath city code
Right,
road.
right. So the gate is the issue, and that's what triggers hooking up to the borough's code on gates. Because they figured out you need a turnaround and
Yeah.
all that. So maybe we could step back a little bit and just think, what tweaks could we make to our current code and additions to make sure that these eventualities are covered in case someone wants a gated community?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it
Wells.
we can probably address in our update of Title 16
Mm-hmm.
subdivisions.
Mm-hmm.
If we tighten up that title, I
And
think
it's
we
good to
should.
think about PUDs as we try to tighten that up. And just think, well, what, with our one example and maybe with Homer's example,
Mhm.
because that was a mixed-use thing that covered a huge, you know, they reduced setbacks, they constricted things, they limit, nobody can go birding anymore. They had a little tiny easement so you could get out to a traditional birding spot, the lake house. So it created quite an uproar. I mean, it was packed. It was just simply packed. People were very upset about it. And they didn't apparently convince their commission that it was according to the code that they had already.
Mhm.
So it just seems like a Pandora's box. It seems like, do we want to open that up and create problems where really we don't seem to have problems right now? But we can look ahead and see where we want to zone them
Yeah.
and where,
Right.
how big they should be. In this document, the American Planning Association, they were talking about a 50 square mile planned unit development. We don't have that luxury. And then they were saying as small as 2 acres. But I'm thinking the planned unit development in Seward next to, I mean, surrounded by Seward, it's not planned unit development. That's just going to be kind of an island of difference that may not be a benefit to us.
I imagine they're not that common in a town our size, in a small town. right?
Exactly,
I mean,
they're so small.
and then I guess, so we have one, right? Can you just have one, and then there's no more PUDs allowed? Like, is that a,
An attorney question?
yeah, you know, it seems like some,
Yeah, it would, I mean, it would just be a common non-conforming use.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
which
It's
is,
subdivision follows.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
just as long as, if and when it's developed, you know, as long as the uses continue, then it can continue to exist as that planned unit development. But in this particular instance, where it's like the CUP was primarily addressing streets, the installation of the septic and wells, and then the requirements for the docks, which a lot of those requirements are already established in like the harbor process for doing anything in the tideland, so it's, yeah, I don't think there would be any complications if we did just strike planned unit developments from our code, and we still have one.
Right. Okay, so that's an option.
It would be interesting to reach out to the developer because they have plan for phase 2. And that would be a really good model to say, well, what do you envision for that and how could that work under what we already have? What's different that would require a PUD instead of working within our existing code? Plus, you know, we're adding the gated community code, but
Yeah.
it'd be nice to hear them because they put more thought into it than anybody.
And the wells, we'd have to
And the
tweak
wells,
that.
right,
Yeah.
so offer that, you know, if we offered, you could put in wells and then if the water system gets within 600 feet, you have to hook up. And in the septic, it'd be nice to hear what their vision is that would already fit in our code. Be really interesting.
It'd also be nice just to kind of, we wouldn't have to basically rewrite anything.
I know.
We could just go by the existing code.
Right.
Yeah, like you guys were talking about, which
Right.
does make sense.
That input would be good.
As long as it's not something we're missing.
Right.
you
Yeah,
know?
I'll reach out in discussions that I had with them during the whole other CUP process. They, you know, briefly mentioned their plans for that northern portion, and it did sound pretty straightforward as far as, you know, they would rezone portions to be more business-related zoning closer to the highway, and then residential. So I think they already had in mind to rezone to achieve the land uses that they wanted. And then the utilities, of course, would be the only issue that in our discussions that they had brought up. So yeah, I'll have to talk with them and see if they foresee any other issues besides the utilities. Because if it is just utilities, I think we can find another way to address that versus doing another PUD.
Yeah, makes sense. We probably should also address docks too, because we don't really address them because all of
Right.
the waterfront downtown isn't privately owned. But as you move across the other side of the bay,
Right.
you do end up with a fair number of areas that are privately owned. And that might come up again, especially if they actually do put them in. I mean, just down the way there's private land, and I don't know, it might be worth putting something in about private docks as well. I don't think it'd be very difficult to adhere to.
Like adding it to our land use table or land use allowed table.
Yeah, especially since if this goes in and it's successful, then maybe the landowners to the south might think,
Right.
hey, I could put a subdivision in too. Which, you know, they should and could.
Keep in mind that they only own the land above the mean high water line.
Yes.
It's our public property, city highlands, that their docks are going to extend into.
True, and that's why I think we should say something about it, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be fairly complicated because most of those docks, the permit's gonna go through the harbor or the state or federal, depending on where they are and what the waterways
All of
are.
them,
All
yeah.
of them, so
Right.
I think really we just need to be that their docks are allowed with a conditional use permit, but must adhere to all regulation bodies or something like
I don't believe the harbor has any regulations on
that.
docks.
Lease, I guess they'd have to talk to them because they would have to,
Right.
have to lease from the harbor.
Right. So, my understanding, the city provides the docks, and then they lease a slip. So they're not developing the dock.
No, I mean they would have to
In
lease the
the-
tidelands from the city if they wanted to
Put
do
an
docks on it.
additional.
Yeah,
Over in
the side.
on the
Oh, right,
private land.
right. That was just meaning that the harbor doesn't have regulations on private docks, just because they have a dock.
Yeah.
They don't have any regulations on
Right.
how a private person would have a dock. So we don't, I don't believe we have anything in code right now about private docks.
There
No.
may be, I think there is some building code on it, but minimal,
Okay?
yeah.
So,
Yeah. Should look that
land
up.
above high water.
Mean
Like-
high tide?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Average high tide,
Yeah.
right? Or,
Yeah. The mean high tide and below mean high tide is like public area.
okay.
Depending on
So
where
an
it is,
average
it
high
goes.
tide is kind of known all around the coast of the bay, and the docks would have to be,
Kind of. It's a tricky thing to nail down exactly.
Right.
okay, but it's mean
The
high
line
tide.
of, the
yeah.
line of vegetation is a common way to mark it.
Okay,
So where the beach ryegrass starts, that's private. Below that, even though, like at Low Point, earthquake shook everything down and their lot lines might go out into the water. But our Constitution, our Alaska Constitution, protects our right to walk that beach because the tide covers it and
Right.
it goes away
but you could still put a dock.
on your
further
private
down.
property.
Yeah,
As
we
long
could just
as you
like
were
walk
still on
around
the
the dock,
property.
you know, there's like a, you'd be able to determine the line. I mean, this is getting ahead, but I was just
Right,
curious,
right.
I'm trying to like picture where these
Because
docks
that
go.
wouldn't get in the way. If
Yeah.
you were going to put a dock there, you would do it knowing that you can't
Well, you need water,
obstruct, you can't
you want
obstruct
water
that,
under the dock,
that
you know?
walkway for the public, so they can just walk over it. They step
Like
over
at
it.
Spring Creek Beach,
Yeah,
we have in our muni plan, it shows that there's an area that's part of the adjacent property owner's
Right.
land that we think is beach. We just
Right,
walk
right.
it, we don't realize there's a line there.
right,
So in the plan, it was, let's get an easement so it's more official. But our Constitution protects our right to do that. Then you get down to the old chip mill dock.
yeah, yeah,
Can't
The
go
chip.
around it, can't go over it, can't go in it. So, but the Constitution allows us reasonable access to trespass over their property, and get right back down the beach and go on. So it's not like a forbidden
right, right.
place.
You can't block it off.
We have the right to get to the other side of that beach.
But it is like feasible to put docks in with these, you know, rules
And know
about
that we'll be
mean high
walking
tide.
on their property to get around them.
Right, right,
They just need to know that.
yeah.
Yep, it's really great that we have access to our beaches, so.
So maybe if it's okay, we'll just kind of like skim through, starting on page 11, these code requirements for plan unit development, just as not, because it sounds like we don't want to address plan unit development code right now, but maybe just look at building up our subdivision code more. But I just want to see if there's anything within these plan unit development code requirements that we want to tag for addressing in our subdivision code. So of course, land use is allowed, that we're just gonna leave that in our regular code under the zoning, land use is allowed. Development standards, sounds like we're fine with what development standards we have in our code right now.
Except we want to change it so that if you don't have access to sewer or to city sewer or city water, you can have your own.
I think
Okay,
it's already
so yeah,
changed
so-
for sewer, but just need to change for water. right?
So
That's
yeah,
right,
so the
just for water.
connection to public water and sewer utilities we need to address.
So the public water,
I think
Okay.
it's just the water, but.
yeah. You already have, if you're farther than 600 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that applies to electric too.
I don't know.
Do you know if you're farther from, I guess you just have to pay a whole lot of money if you want electricity, but you're not required to have it. You
Yeah.
could have your own solar, you could have batteries, you could have wind. So that's not an issue. Electric is not an issue.
Yeah,
But the water is, because that's sort of
right.
Yeah.
it's different.
Like, would roads go under the development standards too then, or?
Yeah, so road.
Or the gate, I guess, or one of those
Mhm.
two?
Yeah, that can, I mean, yeah, we can address that in our subdivision code, so yeah, roads,
Roads are at the
Okay.
bottom of
Okay,
that
there it
list.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
and then,
And for
Com-
roads, under roads, we should put gates,
yeah,
and that would be the borough. Gates and private roads.
I like the way the borough put everything
Right.
together.
Right, so we just add Gates private roads and use the boroughs example.
I don't know if that'd be up to you guys if we need to change it at all. I liked how it was, we could probably talk about that later. But consistency is
Okay.
nice,
Okay.
if we feel like theirs is acceptable.
And then, I mean, open space requirements. Is that anything we would want to address with subdivisions in general? Like a subdivision that's X amount of acres is required to have X amount of open space?
I like that.
Or-
I think it's a good idea.
What do we have for open space now?
Nothing?
Yeah,
Nothing.
I think we need that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think we should also talk about the sidewalks in there too. Because I always hear that a lot about, developments going in and people wanting sidewalks. So I think that's a point to kind of talk about. It's a sticky one because it costs a lot of money. But maybe do something where if the lots are smaller than X amount, then sidewalks are required. But if they're, acre lots, then they don't feel like you need a sidewalk across it. But, if it's like a small subdivision, then maybe require sidewalks for the new builds that might be coming.
Or a certain density,
Or density, yeah.
like Hilltop, will have sidewalks.
Yeah.
And that's gonna have so many people.
Mhm.
And the other gateway, the first gateway second one, doorway,
Yeah.
doesn't have sidewalks.
Yeah.
Boy, do they need them.
We could look at Hilltop and see what what we required for that and kind of use mirror the same
Right.
setup.
Right.
But I think that's a good thing to put in.
Yeah, addressing that and yeah.
We haven't really gotten, it's on our list, but we haven't gotten to it, but many communities have conservation overlays that protects critical sensitive habitat, and I'd like to work towards incorporating that into our design standards so that these really precious lands are saved.
Within the subdivision, Title 16 subdivision, or would that fall under Title 15 somewhere?
Well, if we're dealing with subdivisions, I think it should be there as well.
Okay.
It should probably be in subdivision because that would be something that we would be looking at only in a
That'd be part of
subdivision.
that checklist.
Yeah,
Okay.
it wouldn't be in like a one lot.
Right,
One person wouldn't have to make one. It would be as if you're creating a whole subdivision.
right, that sounds good.
Okay.
And we need to kind of wrap this section up so we have time for the second work session.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good on. So just make sure I'm understanding the discussion that when occurred. I'll contact the developer for the plan unit development and see what their plans are for that northern portion, and if it could be addressed in other avenues through code without a plan unit development. And I can report back to you, and if it seems like plan unit developments aren't a high necessity in the future for Seward, then we can discuss possibly removing that from code or adding requirements depending on the conversation that I have with the developer. Is that the?
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, because we're not coming up with advantages to having PUDs.
No, not many. Not any. Yeah.
Okay.
We can't do it in our normal subdivision.
I'd also like to consider deleting cluster subdivisions. They're very closely related, and they're allowed in our code in industrial, R1, R2, and R3. I'm not sure about the one there. They're allowed in R1, R2, and R3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we strengthen up subdivision and make it pretty, I don't wanna say streamlined, make it easy to go through and see what you need, then I don't know if we need to have extra stuff.
Right.
Right, and yeah, if you look at the definition of a cluster subdivision on page 13, I mean, a primary reason for a cluster subdivision is to be permitted a reduction in lot area. And that has been expressed that we don't want smaller lots, so. And there's no reason to keep it in code if that's not what we want in R1, R2, and R3.
Right,
We already have small lots. We don't want smaller.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, if the commission is okay with that, we will put that on the agenda to just bring that code change to strike it from the land uses allowed and the definitions.
Yeah. If
Okay.
everybody else likes that.
Works for me.
Good, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the subdivision. Yeah, what page?
Title 16 subdivision, that's 16. Page 16, but really 17 is that's all.
I know, it's always confusing. Would you like to give us an overview, Courtney?
Yeah, so right now, I believe on the April 15th meeting, there should be a resolution that will address the planning and zoning's role in Title 16. Currently, there are some minor references to the Planning and Zoning Commission in Title 16, but generally it's a title that's overseen by the city manager. It actually doesn't specify who it's overseen by, so the city manager, essentially.
Yeah.
But the commission obviously has a part in the review with the preliminary plats. And so when a preliminary plat is brought before the commission, you're reviewing, overall compliance with general code requirements, and those are the development requirements for lot size, street frontage, that sort of thing. And then the commission also, in those resolutions, will require a subdivision agreement if public improvements aren't to that area. But besides that, the commission doesn't have a lot of input on, well, what are those requirements then that get put into the subdivision agreement. So that's what we're trying to develop now, is within Title 16 to specify the requirements that we want to see in our subdivision agreements. And so these will specify, specifics for roads, utilities, lighting, sidewalks, open space, some of these things that we've already kind of addressed that we want to see. Number of road entrances required per total number of lots. Anyway, but yeah, all of these things that our code doesn't address right now, that,
Yeah. Those are all pretty.
yeah. And I guess we can kind of look through our code, our current code, so you can see what we do have. We have definitions and then the conditions to plat. So the requirements there for a preliminary plat application. The requirement there of building permits restricted, and that basically is just like a lot has to have public improvements to it before anything can be built on it. And then the required public improvements on page 20. So currently this is all that our code has specified for public improvements. Streets, telephone and electric lines, which that could probably be updated.
Yeah, that's 50 feet needs to be changed.
Right, 50 to 60, and shall be gravel surfaced is pretty outrageous.
Yeah, let's get rid of
Shall
that.
be.
They need to be paved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Paved for sure.
And I guess, how specific is the commission wanting to get within this? Like this could be an area where we highlight gated and private roads and all those requirements there too.
I just want to see the private roads and gates go in where they're in the appropriate space. I'm not sure which one's the best spot to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't want it to feel like it could go in a few different places and still
Right.
be applicable to various things.
See how the borough places it too.
Yeah, you do that.
And we might, under this, on page 20, under water system, that might be water system and sewer system. That might be where we can add, if it's not available, and just pull in that language from our code.
Where is the septic already? That's under, it's in the code where you can
I
have
don't
septic.
remember where that is.
Here, I'll,
Because wherever
Do a
that
quick
is, we
search
could
it.
just add water to that, correct?
Okay.
I mean,
Well, it's a development requirement,
yeah, I wouldn't,
public improvement.
yeah, I guess.
it's in Title 14, which would be Public Works title, so any modifications, so it's in 14.20.010, use of public sewers required in time of connection, so it says, that, yeah, so I won't read the specifics.
Yeah,
Right.
that's fine.
It just seems a developer or a person shouldn't have to go all these different sections. I'd like to see it all together. So here's what you need
That makes
for water and
sense.
sewer.
Yeah.
A, if you have access, B, if you don't, and just have it be under these improvements
It would make it,
section.
it would be
It's
nice
real
for
clear.
a developer or somebody to come through and just look down a list and be able to,
Yeah,
boom.
Yeah, so I guess that is a question I was having as I was thinking through this is, we have these kind of general requirements here,
Mhm.
and then there are much more specific design standards, right? How you're engineering the road, how deep you're putting the sewer lines and the water lines,
Mhm.
what type of materials you're using. Do we want, I guess, yeah, how do we separate that?
You
How?
could maybe reference it. Would that be easier? If they are, it sounds like they're pretty extensive
Mhm.
and detailed, but maybe in this section they could be referenced.
Okay.
Just
So-
briefly referenced so you knew there was another place where you had to know more.
Okay.
Then you wouldn't have to duplicate everything.
Yeah, that
That's
makes
good.
sense.
Yeah, because you don't want too much,
You're right.
loaded
Yeah,
up there.
Don't want to make
Right.
it so
Little
bulky.
footnote.
Right.
That's
C
the problem.
here, yeah.
So this area would specify then what the required public improvements are, and maybe some general requirements, for example, streets 60 feet in width and paved, but then more specific, someone would say, see city code 14 point whatever.
Reference for
Mhm.
putting a street in.
But then the allowances or the exceptions for, or if there are exceptions for not hooking into city utilities, could be stated here versus
Yeah.
having to hunt for it in code.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's not going to be, it's only going to be a couple sentences for that, so it's not referencing a large body of work that we need to move somewhere else to. It's
Right.
pretty straightforward, I think.
So most people are not familiar with our code. And we only deal with mostly Title 15, so I don't know what's in Title 14.
Mhm.
So just knowing that that's available would be really helpful.
I mean, who's looking at code? I think I've asked this before, like developers, they're familiar with code. Maybe not necessarily, right? Like
They're going to look at it before they do something. I don't
Right.
know if I'd say they're,
experts.
it depends on the
Right.
And
person.
every code's different, like you say, our
Yeah.
code,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Doesn't hurt, and it might help. I noticed, maybe this is a timely place to say it, but I noticed that the borough differs in lot frontage, how they measure lot frontage. It's really, like we just say, okay, you measure, this is the south end of your lot, and it goes from A to D, and that's your lot frontage, and here's the road. And they go, well, it's it's from the setback, you have a, whatever, 20-foot setback, and then we measured across there. So it does result in a pretty different shape of your property. It could go like this, and then then they squeeze in another oddball thing next to it, especially around cul-de-sacs. So I think we need to be sure that if we take anything from the borough code, that it's superior to what we have.
Definitely.
And I kind of like how we measure it. It's real clear. Here's your two corners, go across. You don't have to measure back and all
Right. Yeah, I think it's important that we don't just copy and paste.
that. Right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, make sure.
Only take the good stuff.
Exactly. And there's lots of good stuff.
Yeah, I think I'd like to also look at street lights in here too. I think
Okay.
It's pretty vague, and we added some wording to the planned.
Yeah.
Yeah, to have
Yeah, I took that wording from
fully shielded.
state standard, federal standard or something like that. And it basically, I'd have to look at it, we'd have to look
Yeah.
it up again, but I did like the way it was worded. It basically talks about using streetlights that direct the light down instead of just shining it everywhere, because it doesn't need to be shined straight up. It just,
Right.
I don't remember how it was worded. We can look into that. It was like downward facing illumination, or it was a
That's really
standard
good.
wording for the industry for that style of light. So it would be very easy for somebody to look that up, and it just brings up a standard.
That's great. And do we want to encourage LED if possible?
Do we need to say it? I feel like it's just kind of going that
The
way.
economics will
Yeah.
dictate it?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
I think they should put them in, but I think the industry is kind of just moving that way.
Okay.
So I don't know. Maybe just-
We might nudge them if they're required.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, I'm just,
Uh-huh.
I
Right,
don't know if it's 100% necessary, since it's kind of where it's going.
right.
But,
We could ask electric about that.
yeah, that'd be a good idea.
I for one appreciate seeing the night sky. And we live in a beautiful place that has stars all winter. If the clouds.
If we could see
If we could see the sky. Anyway, when you do see the sky, I appreciate having the shielded lights, so in between the street lights you can appreciate it. The prison is just like, we're here, you know, it's just huge light pollution over there, it's just too bad.
And it's not an extra burden to a developer. A lot of areas are going that way. These
Right.
lights aren't any different except for
Right.
just
Right.
shielded down. So
Yeah.
it's not a, we're not bringing undue burden to anybody.
There's a good website on this called darksky.org.
Oh, nice.
It's kind of a thing in astronomy communities.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know you can get
That's really
certified.
nice, thanks.
Dark city.
Yeah, it's-
Huh,
As an
interesting.
official certification.
We like certifications.
You have to go. You have to go pretty dark.
Huh.
We're real bright, so
Well,
it would be a.
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah. But look into it. It's pretty neat.
Where would ADA requirements fit in? I think we
Um,
really need to emphasize that need and compliance.
So ADA requirements for parking or for, yeah, and what
For
specifications
everything,
of
everything.
development?
Like,
like
if you
the-
put in sidewalks, ADA curbs.
Right. Okay, so primarily, because are there ADA requirements for, I would imagine for roads? Just for sidewalks? Like all?
Parking, sidewalks and parking.
Sidewalks and parking?
Yeah, wider parking spots.
Mhm. Signage.
And signage, okay.
Accessible
Yeah, that
sidewalks
is something too that I don't think that's addressed here is signage. But yeah, signage might be a good thing to put in
Okay.
here as well.
And then we talked briefly before about bringing non-conforming subdivisions. That these are subdivisions that were platted a long time ago,
Oh, yeah.
and now they don't conform to what our current code is. So I'd like to make them illegal, non-conforming developments. And if a developer wants to develop them now, they have to bring all those setbacks and lot frontages and, you know, into compliance.
Could you just make a plat over a certain age that had not been, that's nothing been done to it, hasn't been started, just make them void? And
Well, yeah, could you just make them void?
like they would, like in the, when I was reading through the, for this is not exactly the same, but for the plan unit development,
Succession.
the Homer, they gave a certain amount of years, and then if you could reapply, but if you hadn't done anything or hadn't started
right.
after 1 year, then it was void. You had to redo the whole process.
Wow, yeah.
So something similar to that, where X amount of years have lapsed and nobody's put any infrastructure in. It just
Oh,
never
that'd
got
be a
done.
way to do it. wouldn't it?
Then you, because if you started on it and you're still working on it, you know, you got it. But if you haven't done anything with it and it's just been sitting there, not necessarily vacant, but the, you know, no trees have been cut, haven't shown any interest in actually using that particular plat, then it just becomes void and you have
But what
to
if it's already to code? You wouldn't want to lose that expense. It's very expensive
That's true.
to plat property. I'm just focusing on the ones
Okay.
that are so old.
So maybe not a time
They
limit,
don't.
but a code.
Yeah, they don't.
must adhere to
They no
code now.
longer conform. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes it even easier.
exactly.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
the toughest part is that since a lot of them are owned by individual people already,
Okay.
then that would probably just develop them for themselves versus selling. Or if they did sell, they'd sell the vacant land and then someone
So-
else. Anyway, I'm trying to just think of like what point would we even come into the process, you know, because right now land sales aren't anything that we get to review. And
if
so if they, sell them off and then someone has a parcel that was legally subdivided back then and they legally bought it,
do we even have any that we really need to address? Because right, if they were platted and they don't they don't adhere to code now, but all of them are already sold off, then
So it must-
you couldn't redo it because they're already
Right.
owned.
Must have to be an undeveloped subdivision plat that no longer conforms, so undeveloped. And did you mention there's some plats up on Barwell that are
yeah, so
undeveloped
And
plats?
unowned, like individually, like they haven't
Right.
sold off.
Well, I'm not sure about that. But
they're,
Because if it was sold off,
then,
two people,
then what?
you can't really adjust it. 'Cause they-
No.
you know.
yeah, right there on, you go up Barwell, up Canes Head, all back in there are the,
And is it individually owned lots or is it just totally undeveloped, unsold?
so behind, I guess it's the Harold Avenue, there are two large lots, but one is owned by the city and then one is owned by a private owner. And then there are two large lots that are not subdivided that are owned by a private individual. And then there are a bunch of smaller subdivided lots right there behind Pacific Park Place. Or Pacific Park, and those are all, I want to say 4,000 square foot lots. So yeah, those are probably
These are
the main
legal
ones.
non-conforming lots.
Right.
Okay.
And those ones I think are only owned by two individuals. Two individuals own multiple lots there.
Well, maybe that won't work, but it'd be nice to figure out a way to bring legal non-conforming lots into conformity if possible.
And I mean, with these, there are some things within our code that would encourage someone to replat. So these ones are zoned R3. But if you wanted to build a multifamily dwelling, anything but a single family home, you couldn't build it over a lot line. And so an individual wouldn't want to build a single-family home on most likely, on a 4,000 square foot lot. And so, I mean, so they would, even though they are non-conforming lots, they would still have to meet the setback requirements, the lot coverage requirements, all of those things, which would encourage then replats to occur before development, but.
Interesting. Well, one of the subdivisions that I was aware of is the 1985 Gateway subdivision number 1, which is up on Phoenix. That was developed based on that plat.
Oh, right,
The lot
right.
frontages are smaller than what's required now. And when I asked the borough about that, they said, well, it's a legal plat because we have nothing that says you can't build on a legal plat, if you stay within these constraints. So we have smaller frontages on some of those curves than what we would probably allow now. And I don't remember what else is different, but that's where that concept first occurred to me. It's like, we have old plats that would not be legal today.
So in that instance, we could put something, I think, in the subdivision, because if a developer, like in this Gateway subdivision, the developer had purchased that whole area, and then they were required to get a subdivision agreement. In that subdivision agreement, if we had it in Title 16, it could have stated something like that. If the current plat didn't meet development requirements, then a replat would be required.
I would like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Bring it back up to
But then
compliance.
if it's just individual property owners,
Right,
with the non-conforming
before that
lot.
happens.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's still just a vacant, undeveloped total subdivision. And right now, I don't know if there are any like that, but I think it'd still be nice to have that in our code,
yeah, okay.
just in case. And then you discussed on page 21, someone mentioned that it says the subdivision agreement shall provide for the apportionment of the cost of the required public improvements between the city and the subdivider. Was that the one? Let's see. Somehow
Yeah, number 3?
We were talking
subdivider
about that.
ended up paying for everything. Yeah, I put a star by that one.
Yeah.
Obligating all the
Yeah.
property owners. That's the one.
So the better should be 100%
Right,
of the cost of streets within the boundaries of the subdivision.
right. So we ran into this recently where lots were created and people bought them individually, and then they found out there was no water or sewer, so they couldn't develop their property. And the developer should have provided those, but they didn't. And so they said, okay, we'll form the special improvement district, and you can pay each an astronomical amount of money that they could not afford. And they were very upset, just understandably. So, be nice if that hadn't happened. But I think we need to find out a resolution for that. And weren't you guys working on that? Figure out some way so they wouldn't have to pay so much.
Fern and Forest Acres.
Yeah.
So that has been a discussion with city council and then, city manager and assistant or deputy city manager. And the solution currently that has, been worked out is that those individual property owners can form an assessment district and then apply for, the developer reimbursement program, which would then pay for 50% of the cost to install utilities. Then the property owners would then be responsible for the other 50%. The main issue is that there is no current funds in the developer reimbursement program. So once funds are built up again, then they can apply for those. But
Is the development reimbursement program something that should be in this title? Is that a,
Yeah, potentially could be, because I don't know if it is in code anywhere. It's just a program, I think, established by city council currently.
would that be an appropriate thing to have in our code?
It's a program, it's not necessarily code.
Okay.
Um, I don't know, I'm leaning towards no just because it's not code.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to burden this
And there's no-
document.
Yeah, there's no
Right.
set funding source to like keep money in that fund right now. It was originally started with funds from COVID. And then, and so the city, basically the developer reimbursement program, unless the city can find ways to build up those funds again, it's gonna eventually
Yeah.
not have any more money.
Yeah, let's leave it out. And then if somebody's reading through this and coming to you guys or to other departments, I feel like that's something that just kind of, oh yeah, pops up. That's the way to do it.
That sounds good.
But I guess, yeah, this compliance procedure, our thoughts are to strike number 3. So we're not giving the subdivider an option to form a special assessment district and then leave the obligation to install utilities to the property owners.
Yeah.
So then the only other 2 options for installing utilities for a developer would be number 1 and number 2. Which is, I think, number 1 is to install the required public improvements before the final plat is approved, and then the other one allows them to install the improvements after the final plat is approved. But there would be, within the subdivision agreement, there would be stipulations of timeframes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I like that.
Very expensive to be a subdivider.
Is the subdivider the developer or each particular owner of a property?
The developer.
Okay,
Yeah, somebody who's had, that's one big chunk of land.
gotcha.
That's breaking
That's
it
what I
down.
thought.
And that way, like Carol was saying, people don't get stuck buying a piece of property not knowing that they can't really ever afford to get utilities to it.
Right. With all this in here, seems like the subdivider pays for
Right.
100%.
Exactly.
Okay,
Of everything.
that's good.
Usually just the costs get passed down to the property owner when it comes, the lots all of a sudden cost more. So usually just gets trickles down effect.
I
But
see.
that way at least they have the infrastructure where they can build.
Uh-huh.
Anything else?
Yeah, anything else?
That brings us almost to the very end, doesn't it? Just a couple of pages, so.
Yeah.
What, do people do these bonds? The performance bond, deposit in escrow, letter of credit, are those effective tools to make sure that things are accomplished, thinking of CUPs? Is that an enforcement tool? Because then you're covered if they don't comply. I don't know, do in your experience, have developers or subdividers use these performance bonds and surety bonds and,
Yeah, I'll have to ask. I'm not
yeah.
aware.
The language is new to me, and so looking at the
Uh-huh.
subdivision agreement we're working on with Mount Ellis Estates, I did ask the city attorney about that. And is it a good part of the subdivision agreement? And he said yes. So yeah, it's a part of those agreements.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look into for
Yeah.
CUP
See what tools we have.
compliance.
Uh-huh.
All right, so with the Title 16, then we'll draft a some preliminary edits with this and bring it back to another work session.
Yeah, sounds good.
Lots to do.
Always.
Always. Right. Would the commission like to stop the work session now and take a break till 7?
Yes,
Or
yeah, that's a good idea.
6:55? Okay, see you here at 6:55.